Before your next bite of breakfast, just pause for 1 second. Think about how your body felt after your last meal. That slight drop in energy that hits around mid morning, that quiet hunger creeping back in even though you ate just a couple of hours ago, that little pull towards something sweet, a biscuit, a cup of tea with sugar, anything to get you going again. Most people feel this and think nothing of it. They assume it is just normal. They push through it, grab a snack, and move on. But what if I told you that feeling is actually a signal, a very specific signal that your blood sugar is already rising and falling in a way it should not be? And the part that surprises most people is that signal is almost always triggered by a breakfast they fully believe is healthy, the one sitting on their table right now. Stay with me because in the next several minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why this is happening, what your breakfast is actually doing inside your body, and the one simple food that most people have been avoiding for entirely the wrong reasons. This changes things. And I say that after more than 20 years of working in metabolic health. My name is Dr. Megan Foster. I have spent the better part of 2 decades working with patients who are genuinely confused about why their blood sugar stays unstable despite doing everything they believe is right. They are cutting sugar. They are eating what looks like a healthy breakfast. They are following advice they have heard for years, and still their numbers stay uneven, their energy dips, their hunger returns too quickly after eating, and almost every single time, the root of the problem is not what they are eating for lunch or dinner, it is what they are eating first thing in the morning. Because here's the truth that most mainstream nutrition advice still gets wrong. The biggest driver of unstable blood sugar in everyday people is not dessert, it is not snacking, and it is not eating late at night. It is a high carbohydrate breakfast that enters your bloodstream too fast, spikes your blood sugar, triggers a sharp insulin response, and then drops you right back down within an hour or two. And then the whole cycle starts over again. Oats, fruit juice, brown bread, granola, low fat yogurt with added fruit. These are the foods that fill the shelves of every health food section. These are the foods recommended by well meaning articles and morning television segments. And in many cases, especially for people dealing with blood sugar sensitivity or early metabolic issues, these foods are making the problem worse every single morning. Now, I want to be careful here because I am not saying these foods are harmful for everyone in every situation. What I am saying is that starting your day with fast digesting carbohydrates, especially without enough protein to balance them, is one of the most common and least talked about drivers of blood sugar instability in people who are genuinely trying to eat well. And the fix is simpler than you might think. It does not involve expensive supplements. It does not require a complicated meal plan. In most cases, it involves a food that has been sitting in your kitchen all along. But before I get to that, I want you to really understand what is happening mechanically inside your body. Because once you see this clearly, everything else makes sense. And when you understand why something works, you are far more likely to actually follow through with it. Think about your bloodstream like a highway. On a normal day, traffic moves steadily. Cars enter at a controlled rate, they travel at a reasonable pace, everything flows smoothly. Now imagine someone opens a gate and releases 500 cars onto that highway all at the same time. No spacing, no traffic lights, just a sudden flood of vehicles hitting the road at once. That is what happens to your blood sugar when you eat fast digesting carbohydrates on an empty stomach first thing in the morning. Glucose from those carbohydrates enters your blood rapidly. Your body scrambles to deal with the sudden surge. Insulin spikes sharply to move that glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells. And then when the job is done, blood sugar drops. Sometimes it drops quite sharply. That sharp drop is what you feel as the mid morning crash. That is the tiredness, the foggy thinking, the hunger returning too soon, the craving for something sweet or something quick to get you back up again. Now imagine a different version of that same highway. Same number of cars, but this time there are traffic lights installed at regular intervals. Cars still move. Well, traffic still flows, but it is controlled, steady, manageable. No sudden flood, no overwhelm. That is what protein does in a meal. It slows the rate at which glucose from carbohydrates enters your bloodstream. It installs those traffic lights. And eggs specifically are one of the most effective and accessible ways to do that at breakfast. This is not a theory I invented. This is established nutritional science. Clinical studies have consistently shown that meals with higher protein content, especially from whole food sources like eggs, led to lower blood sugar spikes after eating, a gentler insulin response, and improved energy stability throughout the day. When researchers compared groups eating high protein breakfasts against groups eating high carbohydrate breakfasts with the same total calorie count, the protein groups had measurably better glucose control across the entire day. Same calories, completely different outcome inside the body. Now, I want to spend a moment on something that most people never stop to consider, which is the specific hormonal environment your body is in when you wake up in the morning. Because morning is not just any meal window, it is actually a unique and somewhat vulnerable time for blood sugar management. When you first wake up, your body is in a state where it has not been fed for several hours. Your liver has been slowly releasing stored glucose overnight to keep your brain and organs functioning during sleep. And in the early morning hours, your body releases a natural wave of cortisol, which is your primary waking hormone. Cortisol helps you feel alert and ready to move. But cortisol also raises blood sugar slightly as part of that wake up process. This is sometimes called the dawn effect. What this means is that by the time you sit down to eat breakfast, your blood sugar is already primed. It is already slightly elevated compared to where it was in the middle of the night. So, when you then eat a high carbohydrate breakfast on top of that cortisol driven morning rise, the combined effect is a sharper spike than you would get at any other point in the day from the same food. The morning is actually the time when your body is most sensitive to carbohydrate intake. Eating a high carbohydrate breakfast is essentially the worst time to do it from a blood sugar perspective. This also helps explain why so many people who are not eating particularly badly overall still struggle with their blood sugar numbers. It is not their whole diet that is the problem. It is specifically the morning routine. The first meal of the day is setting a tone that the rest of the day has to recover from. Now, let me walk you through how to actually use eggs to change that pattern, starting with the basics and building up to the most effective approach. Eggs prepared simply have essentially zero impact on your blood sugar. They do not raise it, they do not cause a spike, as their natural composition is mostly protein and fat, which means they digest slowly. They do not trigger the rapid insulin response that carbohydrates do, and they remain in your stomach longer, which is what creates the feeling of being genuinely full rather than just temporarily not hungry. Two eggs, boiled or lightly scrambled without excessive oil, eaten in the morning, gives your body a stable starting point, not a spike, not a crash, just a steady base your body can work with comfortably through the morning. Now, here's a mistake I see very often with people who do eat eggs for breakfast. They add toast alongside, or they drink a glass of orange juice with it, or they have a bowl of cereal first and then the eggs. By doing that, they are undermining one of the main benefits of the eggs. The fast digesting carbohydrates in the toast or juice still hit your bloodstream quickly. The eggs help somewhat, but when carbohydrates come first or in a large quantity alongside, the blood sugar spike still happens. The sequence and the balance of the meal matter enormously, and I will come back to that in detail shortly. Also worth noting is that frying eggs repeatedly in a large amount of oil or butter adds unnecessary heaviness to what is otherwise a metabolically clean food. Light cooking methods preserve the protein quality and keep the meal clean. Boiled, poached, or lightly scrambled with a very small amount of oil is the approach that works best over time. There is something else about eggs worth knowing that goes beyond blood sugar, and it surprises a lot of people when I mention it. Eggs are one of the richest dietary sources of a nutrient called choline. Most people have never heard of it, but the research behind choline is quite compelling. Choline is what your brain uses to produce a chemical called acetylcholine, which is heavily involved in memory, focus, and the ability to think clearly and stay mentally sharp throughout the day. A single egg contains roughly 150 milligrams of choline. Two eggs gets you close to the daily amount that most adults need. And the reason this matters specifically at breakfast is that your brain is in a slightly depleted state first thing in the morning after several hours of fasting. It is working immediately when you wake up, managing attention, starting the day, processing information. What you feed it in that first hour either supports that function or competes with it. A carbohydrate heavy breakfast that sends blood sugar spiking and crashing is not giving the brain what it needs. Eggs, by providing stable fuel and choline at the same time, are doing something quite different. This is very likely one of the reasons many people report feeling noticeably sharper and more focused on mornings when they eat eggs compared to mornings when they eat primarily carbohydrates. It is not a coincidence. It is the brain receiving two things it genuinely needs at the time it needs them most. Now, let us look at what happens when you combine eggs with fiber, because this is where things start getting noticeably more effective. Fiber is something that nutritional research keeps returning to, and for very good reason. When you eat fiber alongside protein, the combined effect on blood sugar is even stronger. Fiber physically slows the movement of food through your digestive system. It creates a kind of buffer that limits how fast glucose can enter your blood from the foods around it. So, when you already have protein from the eggs slowing things down and you add fiber from vegetables, you are layering two separate control mechanisms on top of each other. The combination of eggs with vegetables like spinach, tomatoes, bell peppers, or courgette is not just a healthy choice in a general sense. It is specifically effective at reducing the blood sugar response after breakfast. Research examining fiber intake and post meal glucose consistently finds that higher fiber meals produce significantly lower spikes compared to the same calorie meals without fiber. The difference is not small, it is meaningful and consistent. Think of it this way: the protein from the eggs is the traffic light. The fiber from the vegetables is an additional layer of management that controls flow from multiple points. Together, they create a far smoother post meal blood sugar curve than either one alone. The common mistake with this version is swapping the vegetables for bread. People feel like they are adding something to their breakfast by adding toast, but they are actually undercutting the stabilizing effect they are trying to create. Bread, even whole grain, still digests faster than vegetables and still contributes to blood sugar rise. If stability is your goal, the vegetables are the addition to make. And this does not have to be complicated. Scrambled eggs with a handful of spinach and a few sliced tomatoes takes about 5 minutes. Nothing elaborate, nothing expensive, just effective. Now let us move to the most powerful version of this approach. This is where the real visible difference shows up in how people feel throughout the day, and it is the combination that I see producing the clearest results with patients over time. The most effective breakfast for blood sugar control is eggs paired with a healthy fat source, eaten in the right sequence within the meal, with carbohydrates positioned at the end rather than the beginning. Here is why this works so well. Healthy fats, like those found in avocado, slow gastric emptying. That is simply the rate at which food leaves your stomach and begins to be absorbed. When that rate slows down, everything slows down with it. Your blood sugar rises gradually instead of rapidly. Your insulin response is gentler and more controlled. Your energy stays more consistent through the morning. And because fat is genuinely filling, you are far less likely to be reaching for a snack before lunch. When you combine eggs with avocado, you are stacking three separate blood sugar stabilizing effects at once: the protein effect from the eggs, the fiber effect from the avocado and any vegetables, and the fat, slowing the rate of the whole digestive process. All three working together in the same meal. People who follow this approach consistently, meaning most mornings rather than occasionally, begin to notice gradual improvement in their fasting blood sugar readings over time. Their morning numbers, measured before eating, tend to trend lower over weeks. And that matters because fasting blood sugar is one of the earliest and most sensitive indicators of how well your body is managing insulin and glucose over the long run. Small, consistent improvements in that number reflect real changes happening in your metabolism. But here's where people get this wrong, even when they have the right ingredients. They eat the carbohydrates first, they start with toast or cereal, and then they have the eggs and avocado on the side afterward. The blood sugar spike has already begun at that point. The eggs and avocado are still helping, but they cannot prevent the initial spike the way they would if they came first. The order matters as much as the ingredients. Protein and healthy fat first, vegetables second, carbohydrates, if you are including them, last. This sequence produces a measurably different blood sugar response compared to eating the same foods in the opposite order. That is not a theory. That is a documented physiological difference that researchers have demonstrated in controlled settings. Practical application looks like this: 2 eggs scrambled or poached, a handful of spinach or sliced peppers on the side, half an avocado or a drizzle of good olive oil over the vegetables. And then, if you need more fuel because you are active or it is going to be a long morning, a small portion of oats or sweet potato at the end, not as the centerpiece of the meal, as a follow up. When you get this right consistently, the changes in how you feel typically become noticeable within 2 to 4 days, not weeks. Days, you will notice less urgency around mid morning hunger. Your energy will feel more even rather than building and then dropping sharply before lunch. You will find yourself thinking about food less between meals. That calm, clear headed, steady feeling that some people only experience occasionally, that is what properly controlled blood sugar actually feels like. And it is achievable for most people simply by restructuring what breakfast looks like. Before I continue, I want to check in with you. What do you normally have for breakfast? Drop it in the comments below, honestly and without overthinking it. I read through those comments regularly, and they genuinely shape what I cover in future videos. You might be surprised how many people watching this are in exactly the same position you are. Now, let me address the question that comes up every single time eggs are mentioned in a health context: the cholesterol concern. For decades, eggs were linked to raised blood cholesterol and therefore to a higher risk of heart disease. Dietary guidelines reflected that concern for a long time, and many people still carry that worry. If you have been avoiding eggs because of it, that is a completely understandable response, given the information that was widely circulated. But the research has shifted considerably on this. What large scale, long term studies have found is that for most healthy people, the cholesterol you consume in food does not have the direct effect on blood cholesterol levels that was once assumed. The liver plays a much more essential role in regulating blood cholesterol than dietary intake alone, and it actively adjusts its own production in response to what you eat. For most people, eating eggs regularly does not meaningfully raise the type of blood cholesterol associated with cardiovascular risk. I want to be precise here because nuance matters. There is a small group of people whose blood cholesterol does show more sensitivity to dietary fat and cholesterol, and there are individuals with specific genetic or medical conditions that change how their body handles these things. If your doctor has advised you about a specific cholesterol or heart condition, or if you are on medication for cardiovascular issues, please have a conversation with your doctor before making significant changes to your diet. That applies to any dietary change, not only this one. For the broad majority of people watching this, eggs eaten as part of a balanced, protein forward breakfast are not the cardiovascular threat they were once made out to be. What is far more damaging to both heart health and blood sugar management is a diet consistently built around refined carbohydrates and added sugars. And that is precisely what most conventional breakfast advice still centers around. Now, let me walk through a few specific habits that quietly undermine blood sugar control, even in people who are otherwise doing fairly well. I want to give you a complete picture. The first one is fruit juice in the morning. Even freshly squeezed natural juice. When you juice fruit, you remove the fiber. What remains is concentrated natural sugar that enters your bloodstream very quickly because there is nothing to slow it down. A glass of orange juice first thing in the morning can produce a blood sugar spike comparable in speed to a sugary soft drink. People are often surprised by this because juice feels natural and wholesome. But without the fiber, the speed of glucose entry is the issue. If you enjoy citrus in the morning, eat the whole fruit. The fiber surrounding the natural sugar in whole fruit is what controls how fast your body absorbs it. The second pattern is what I think of as the granola assumption. Granola, even the varieties marketed as low sugar or high protein, is typically built around oats and some form of sweetener and usually contains dried fruit. The overall blood sugar impact of most granolas is quite high. People who switch from regular cereal to granola believing they have made a significant health improvement often see far less change in their blood sugar response than they expected. If you enjoy granola occasionally, keep portions small and always eat a protein source like eggs beforehand. The third pattern is skipping breakfast and then eating a large carbohydrate heavy meal in the mid morning when hunger becomes too strong to ignore. Some people skip breakfast intentionally as part of a structured fasting approach, and when managed properly, that can be effective for some individuals. But for many others, skipping breakfast simply leads to a blood sugar dip, intense hunger by mid morning, and then a fast reactive meal that tends to involve more carbohydrates than usual because the body is urgent about refueling. That reactive cycle actually worsens blood sugar instability over time. If fasting is working well for you in a structured way, that is fine. That is, but if you are skipping breakfast by default because mornings are busy and then ending up desperate for food at 10, that pattern is worth addressing. Here is something that almost nobody talks about when it comes to blood sugar, and it costs nothing to change: how fast you eat your breakfast. Not just what you eat, but the actual speed at which you consume it. When you eat very quickly, food enters your stomach in a rush, and your digestive system does not have adequate time to signal properly. Research has shown that eating more slowly produces measurably lower blood sugar peaks after the exact same meal. Slower eating also activates the body's fullness signals more effectively, meaning you feel satisfied sooner and stay full longer. The practical adjustment is simple: sit down, set the phone aside for a few minutes, chew each bite properly. Aim for the meal to take at least 10 to 15 minutes rather than being finished in 3. Small habit, real effect on blood sugar. There is also the matter of stress and sleep because these two things influence blood sugar more directly than most people realize, and no breakfast strategy works as well as it should if these are severely disrupted. When you are under significant stress, your body produces higher levels of cortisol. Cortisol, as I mentioned earlier, raises blood sugar as part of your body's emergency response system. It is designed to give you fast energy when you need to react to something urgent. But when cortisol stays elevated chronically because of ongoing stress, your blood sugar tends to be running higher in the background more consistently. Protein forward breakfasts still help in this context, but the effect may be less dramatic than it would be in someone with more managed stress levels. Similarly, poor sleep directly affects how well your body responds to insulin the following day. Studies show that even one night of significantly reduced sleep can measurably worsen insulin sensitivity the next morning, meaning your body has to produce more insulin than usual to deal with the same amount of glucose. If you are sleeping fewer than 6 hours regularly, your blood sugar management is working against a real handicap every single morning, regardless of what you eat. I raise these not to overwhelm you, but to give you the full picture. The breakfast change I am describing works. It produces real results for most people, but it works best as part of a broader environment where sleep is being reasonably protected and where chronic stress is being managed in whatever way makes sense for your life. The practical starting point remains the same. Change breakfast first. It is the most immediate lever you have. But as you feel those improvements building, it is worth also looking at what your sleep looks like and what you can do to reduce the heaviest sources of daily stress. Let me address the coffee question since it comes up constantly. Black coffee without sugar or sweetened milk has a minimal direct effect on blood sugar for most people. However, coffee does stimulate cortisol, particularly in the morning. For people who already have cortisol rising naturally as part of the wake up process, adding caffeine on top of an empty stomach can amplify the morning blood sugar rise slightly. Some people find that eating their protein based breakfast first and then having coffee produces a noticeably more stable start to the day. It is worth paying attention to your own pattern and adjusting the timing if your morning energy still feels uneven despite the dietary changes. And hydration matters more in the morning than most people give it credit for. Drinking a glass of plain water before eating, before coffee, before anything else, helps your body begin functioning properly after several hours of sleep. Many people wake up mildly dehydrated without realizing it, and even mild dehydration affects how efficiently your kidneys and metabolism function in that first hour of the day. A glass of water first, before your eggs, before your coffee, is a simple addition that costs nothing and supports everything else you are building. Now, I want to talk about something that very few people connect to blood sugar control, and that is the role of your muscles. Not in a fitness sense, in a purely metabolic sense. Muscle tissue is actually one of the primary destinations for glucose after a meal. When you eat and your blood sugar rises, insulin signals your cells to absorb that glucose. Muscle cells are among the most important recipients of that signal. People who use their muscles regularly, even through moderate daily movement, are generally better at clearing glucose from the blood efficiently. Their insulin tends to work more effectively, and their blood sugar peaks. After meals tend to be lower. This does not mean you need to start a gym program. Something as simple as a 10 to 15-minute walk after breakfast can produce a measurable reduction in your post meal blood sugar rise. When your muscles are moving, they draw in glucose and use it as fuel, which reduces how much stays circulating in your bloodstream after eating. Studies on post meal walking consistently show it is one of the most effective and underused tools for blood sugar management that ordinary people have access to. When you combine a protein forward breakfast with a short morning walk, you are working on blood sugar stability from two complementary directions at the same time. The breakfast controls the rate of glucose entry. The walk accelerates the rate at which your muscles clear that glucose. Together, they are a very effective pairing. Now, I want to talk about practical meal variations because eating the same 2 eggs with spinach every single morning gets monotonous, and boredom is one of the most reliable reasons people abandon a new eating habit. Variety is not optional if you want this to be sustainable long term. The egg combination is the foundation, but how you prepare it can rotate daily without changing the underlying benefit. Boiled eggs with sliced avocado and cherry tomatoes is a completely hands off option you can prepare the previous evening. A vegetable omelet with whatever is in the refrigerator takes about 7 minutes. Poached eggs over wilted spinach with a drizzle of olive oil feels like a proper meal, even though it is simple. Scrambled eggs with peppers and sliced cucumber gives you freshness and crunch without adding anything that works against blood sugar stability. The specific vegetable matters less than the presence of fiber alongside the protein. Courgette, mushrooms, kale, rocket, broccoli, asparagus, any of these pair well with eggs and all contribute fiber. If spinach is not your preference, do not force it. Find the vegetable you are willing to eat in the morning and start with that one. For people who genuinely cannot manage a cooked breakfast because of time, 2 boiled eggs prepared the evening before, kept in the refrigerator, is a zero-effort morning option. You peel them and eat them in under 2 minutes. Add half an avocado, which also requires no cooking, and you have the core of what I'm describing without spending any meaningful time in the morning. The barrier people imagine tends to be much larger than the actual barrier once they try it. I also want to address portion size briefly, because people sometimes wonder whether 2 eggs is enough or too much. For most adults, 2 eggs at breakfast is a reasonable starting point. It provides roughly 12 grams of protein, which is enough to initiate the stabilizing effect we have been talking about. Some people, particularly those who are more physically active or who have larger frames, may find that 3 eggs serves them better because it extends the satiety further into the morning. The principle is that protein needs to be the dominant part of breakfast, not carbohydrates. 2 eggs gets you there. 3 eggs gets you there more firmly. What does not get you there is 1 egg alongside a large piece of toast, because at that point, the carbohydrates are dominating the meal and the stabilizing effect is compromised. Now, I want to talk about what to realistically expect over time, because I want to set honest expectations rather than dramatic promises. In the first 3 to 5 days of changing to a protein forward breakfast, most people notice improvements in how they feel. Better energy before lunch, less mid morning hunger, fewer cravings. These early changes are real, but they are primarily about the day to day blood sugar cycle being smoother. Over 2 to 4 weeks of consistency, some people begin to notice their fasting blood sugar readings trending lower. Their energy tends to be more stable throughout the whole day, not just the morning. Some people find they are naturally eating less overall because the morning satiety is carrying them